I'll tell you why, because I have something.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I come up here? Sure.
Yep.
Mine?
No, that's fine. No problem at all.
Was that so that other people can come through?
No, it's actually. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's okay.
Did it again.
There you go. There you go. You're good.
Yeah, I'm just having a driving thing. Exactly. Peripheral vision.
That's just my marker for later when we're going to do a little.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
so
good.
sorry.
It was right on the straight. So I know exactly where it's at. Do you need this? Do you need this? Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it like that.
Are you good? Okay. Alrighty.
It's like, well, you know what? I use the equation. Really, you know, I say that. It's like a herbal shop. But most of it's here. And there's yes.
As you're coming in, if you want to get a copy of the resources, the slideshow we're going to be using, there's a QR code up here, or you can just navigate directly to the bit.ly link. It's http://bit.ly/Sphero_P20. Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for coming. This is awesome. When I was over here at about 7:30 getting stuff all set up and ready to go, I was talking to the technician and showing him some stuff about Sphero. And I was thinking at first that maybe that was going to be the only person I was going to share any information with. So this is awesome that all of you are coming out here early on this last day of the conference. So that's just great. My name is John Senja. I am from Spring Grove Area School District. We are in York County, and I'm an instructional technology specialist. I work primarily in the middle school and the high school. And what I want to do is kind of show you what we've been doing, what we've learned with working with the Sphero robots, primarily with that guy right there, the Sphero Spark. But then we were fortunate enough to, we got kind of like an innovation grant where I did purchase some of the RVRs, the tank robots. So we'll show you some stuff with those as well. Just by a show of hands, how many of you already use Sphero robots in your school or in your classroom? How many of you already use them? Okay. How many over here kind of looking for like an intro into what they do? Okay. All right. Is there anyone in here that already uses, let's say, like Osmobots? Okay. And what about is it dot and dash or dash and dot, whichever way? Okay. All right. All right. Good deal. All right, so what we'll do is we're actually going to have a couple different times where we are going to use the center aisle for a couple different things. So I know some folks have some bags in there. When we go to do a demo, I might ask you just to quick kind of scoot them. I found that that was going to be kind of the best way to be able to show stuff. So if you are off to the sides, when we go to do one of those demos, you might have to stand up so that you can see some things, that type of thing. So that way you can see what we can actually do with these. But what we've actually found when we first got the Sphero robots, the reason that I highly recommend them for use, especially with middle school students, where we've used them a lot, they are extremely tough. When you're working with the Sphero Spark, where it's got that shell all around it, you know, the first thing you're going to ask, especially if you work with middle school, and let's face it, elementary or high school, what happens when they drop it? Because you know they're going to drop it. When they drop it, it is fine. Okay, it has held up. I do have one or two that maybe have a little bit of like a nick in the shell, but it does still work. It also stands up when it falls down steps in your home, because I've done that a couple times as well. Clunks all the way down, hits the door. Now I got a nice mark on the door that I have to repaint. My wife is always thankful that I do painting in the summer, so she's like, yeah, go ahead and repaint that, John. Great. Okay, so I'll fix that up. So they are extremely tough, which works really well. There's a variety of commands you can do. Now, a lot of the little lesson ideas I'm going to show you today really just deal with kind of like these roll and delay commands, but you can get into things like loops, variables, if-then statements, events. There's a lot of different things that you can really take it up a notch with. The other thing we really like with this is that with the Sphero robots, really any type of robot, the students get a way to see physically what's happening with that code. All right? There's a lot of coding tools out there where the students go into the browser and they watch some little character, some little animal go around in a maze and collect the gems, power sparks, stars, whatever. If the student is really not into coding, by the time it's a second tool that's like that, where they're just moving some digital avatar around, a lot of them could care less. But then when they are seeing something actually respond to the commands that they put on their device, send it to that robot and see it follow through, they just get much more engaged. And with middle school students, that then when they're engaged like that, they've got their whole body moving as they're kind of checking things out and seeing how things are mapped out. Really works well. And the last thing, and we've done a little bit of this too, if you're looking at the Sphero robots, instead of just for coding, using these as a power source for objects that the students engineer with Kinects. So if they go and build a chariot or kind of like a little car, that type of thing, where the Sphero acts as the motor to go ahead and propel that vehicle. So then that way they're not really doing the coding, but they're using the Sphero as a way to have that item be propelled so that they can do some different engineering with that. So what we're going to start off with first, we're going to do a little prediction. Okay? So up here I've got a little screenshot of a simple Sphero program. So I'm using the block editor. There's actually 3 ways that you can edit the Sphero. You can do what's called drawing, you can do the blocks, and you can also do plain old text. So here I've got a sample code for commands for the Sphero. I'm going to send the commands to the Sphero here in the center of the room. So we're going to have it actually run. What I want you to do is to take a moment, take a look at those commands. I've got our little heading indicator here to help you out. I just want you to kind of take a look at that and make a prediction. What are we going to see Sphero actually do when we run that? So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and run this here in the center of the room. So I'm going to go ahead and I bring my little, I always have a little start sheet for the students, so that way they've got kind of the headings right there. They've got a set spot where they've got to put that Sphero. It also has conveniently right with it the directions for how they connect it together. It took me about the third time that I printed these out in color that I realized I should laminate it because laminate's more permanent. Because no matter how many times you say, please don't step on those, the students all step on them, and then after the first class, you're like, great, you can't even see it anymore. So I'll go ahead and set this down.
You happen to have that in your
I do. Yep.
Yes. Sorry.
Not laminated, though, y'all. So I go ahead and I set my aim. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to switch this from there to my iPad. Give that a moment. Okay, so I've got my program set. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. We'll see Sphero going. If you can't quite see him, you can also look up here at my live distance position graph going on. There it is. Now, what shape do I almost have? Almost have a rectangle. Now, I'm going to stop this. Here's the next prediction, and I'm not gonna step ahead here. Okay. So actually, I will switch it back because you'll need the little heading thing. So here's my next prediction for you. What do we need to add to finish the rectangle? What do we need to add to finish that rectangle?
90 degrees.
270. 1 second lane. 270.
Now, just keep in mind, you're looking at this heading thing here, but it's actually going that way. So I heard some of you saying about like going 90. We already did 90.
270.
Okay? So we need the 270 in there. Okay? So once I go ahead in, I would add in the 270. Okay? But I also have to add in another command before I go ahead and put in that roll command of 270. The delay. Okay? Now, what the delay does, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to here. I shrink this down a little bit. So when you're in that editor with Sphero, you've got different categories for the commands. When we start out with the students, it's best to try to just limit to a couple different categories or specific commands. So we always start off with just the movements and the control commands. So one of the things that I need to do is I need to add a delay in there. Now what I want to do is I'm going to show you if I don't add a delay in there. Okay, so I've got my, what did I do? I just changed it. Get out of there. Sorry about that. Come on in. Jack that all up. Okay, hold on. So we get our 0, get that all set. I'll do my speed of 100 there. I did my 4 seconds. Got that set. 90, the 1 second. I've got my 180. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my next roll command. And I'm going to put my 270 here. And I'm going to say it's for the 0.9 seconds, not 4.9. 0.9 seconds. I bring my Sphero back. And what we always do with the students, to get them first started, do these predictions, because what we're doing is we're giving them the idea of how you actually debug. Because if you don't do that, they're going to drive you nuts. They're going to come up, is this going to work? Should I do this? Is that going to work? Test it, run it. Okay, that's what I want you to do. So here, if I go ahead and run it, I'll hit start. Sphero goes trucking along. So anyway, what I'll just kind of mention to you here, instead of running that again, if we don't put the delay in between, we're not getting a sharp corner. So when it would come down to the end of that rectangle, instead of going and making that nice 90-degree corner, it's going to come and it's going to do a curve. All right? So the students then learn early on, oh, we need that delay in there. I used to do where I would go through and talk to them about why we do the delay. This has been much more powerful doing it this way, because what the students get a chance to do is just recognize the pattern. They take a look at that program and they look at, oh, well, what did we have before? We had roll, we had delay, we had roll, we had delay. And then we usually have students that will just go ahead and go, oh, we did that because it like stopped so it could make that turn. They come up with that themselves. I don't have to explain it to them. Sometimes I do throw in the nice little science explanation and say, well, you know, it's because it was in motion, you know, and so it keeps on in motion at the same speed and the same direction, all that. I don't have to do that because they get that from what they're working with, okay? So our completed program, we would have to have something like that. Okay? So with Sphero, there are 3 different ways that you can code, and I'll tell you what, I'm actually going to come back to that. Because what I want to do instead is to go over for you some tips for implementation. So the first couple times that we ran this with students, some of the things that I learned the hard way. Okay? There was some stuff that I knew to do right away, like making sure their Bluetooth was on. We are one-to-one with iPads, so a lot of times students would switch off their Bluetooth because they would not charge their iPad. All right? And this was before we could actually say that it was always on through the MDM. So that was always one of the first things, was just make sure the Bluetooth is on. Setting a speed limit. If you don't set a speed limit, what they are going to do, they're going to crank it up to the highest thing they can possibly go. And if you have limited room, like what I had here, I knew that the 100 speed for what I was doing was going to work nice for the carpet. For the carpet at the Westin Hotel, if anybody stayed over there, 100, boy, it kind of struggled because that carpet was all bumpy and everything else. But you know, if you're on just a tile floor, I usually use a speed of around 90 instead. If it goes too fast, they just lose control of it, and then they end up like bothering other groups. So a lot of times we set a speed limit. Having that clear start spot for the location, the connection, instructions. So you can see here, I would have all that. Now, just like any students, I would go over how to connect it, and then once they got their Sphero robot, they completely forget, and they would not, you know, follow. So that way we just had it attached right there with the sheet, okay? Now, we've been very fortunate in our middle school, was basically our old high school converted. So we've got this large area. We have something called a large group instruction room that used to be the tech ed shops that we can go through and spread out. So you can see that we spread out ahead of time where our start stuff was. This was before I learned, oh, let's put the connection instructions with it as well. So later on, then I've got pictures where you'll see the start and those connection instructions. Probably the other part with that, with having that clear start spot, don't have the students come up to get the Sphero. Because what will happen is they'll come up with their device, and some of them, it will then just go ahead and automatically connect to one of those Spheros, and they're not going to know which one, because what you have to do is watch for which one lights up when it first connects. So anytime I'm working with a teacher, if I'm working on my own, we tell them to get to their spot, and then we come around, hand them the Sphero. So that way they're right there with those instructions to get it connected. Just makes a lot more sense for them. Charge them when you can, okay? Because they will keep their charge for a good bit, but when we do like 6 class periods of activities with the Spheros, if we have any little break, even if it's just like, oh, we've got lunch now, then the next group's coming, it's a half hour, we get them on that charger. Okay? Because what will happen is what can really drain them, it's not so much the moving around, it's the light. And even if you don't have your instructions that you want them to have the light glowing, the students are going to make the light glow. Okay? Even if you told them, hey, we're just using control, we're just using movement, they're going to see the part that says light, they're going to go ahead and choose a color and crank up the brightness as far as it can go. And so that stays lit the entire time. Even when I don't have it moving or running a program, just because it's connected to my iPad, it's lit. So it's, draining that down my battery there. You probably only want 2 students per Sphero. If you do 3, you know what you're going to get. 1 person doing nothing. Even in a group of 2, sometimes what you get is 1 student actually doing the coding and the other one is basically just playing rover. They go and fetch the Sphero when they're done running their program. So, sometimes it's a good thing, rule of thumb, to kind of tell them to switch devices, that type of thing. But yeah, definitely groups of 2. If you don't have enough Spheros to do that, then think about trying to set up as a station. I'll show you some ideas for that. Okay. Now the other part then, have them actually copy an example code before you let them loose. So what we did for our little demo when I had you do the prediction, if we were in a class or in a group that we were going to work with this, I would have had you all take out your iPads, all get the Sphero EDU app out and running, and you would have copied this code down. So you'd use the editor, you'd have built it, I'd have come around to help anybody that was struggling with it, but a lot of times the students help each other with getting that stuff in there. So what they learn is that you've got the different blocks that you've got to do. You've got that within each block, like the roll command, you've got 3 different spots, 3 different things that you have to set, the heading, the speed, the time. So they learn how to input all that in. Once we get all that in there, then we go ahead and tell them then we go ahead and do our prediction type of stuff. Ask them to predict what's going to happen. We run it, discuss again, make any changes. That gets them into the idea of how to actually look at the code, start to interpret it, and start to think like a programmer. Oh, I thought it was going to do this, but it didn't. Oh, here's why. And they go back and forth with that. Okay? And the other thing I would say, set them up early for success. So in our sample, I had almost everything for the rectangle except the last 2 commands to go across, where we had to add a delay and add another roll command. You got to do the same thing for your students, because if you make it too hard, if I would just say, hey, go ahead and make a rectangle, they're going to struggle, and if they struggle too much right away, then interest goes down. And instead they're going to start to do the remote control thing with the Sphero and just try to drive it around the room instead of doing the coding. Okay? So having it set up that they can get some early success is really, really important. Okay? And that's my next part there is beware of your drivers that are out there. So if you see a group that it seems like, wow, their Sphero, if I had them that they're supposed to try to do a rectangle and you're not seeing like the Sphero kind of pause at all doing that little delay command, yeah, because they're not. They're just driving it around. They're going ahead and tapping right here, and this basically acts like a virtual joystick to go ahead and drive the Sphero around. Which then other groups are like, wow, look at you guys. But as a teacher, you're like, yeah, you're not doing what you're supposed to. Back up. Okay? And usually all you have to do is come by and say, oh, can I see your code that you got so far? And then you have the fumbling around, the switching, swiping, and they just say, yeah, don't do it anymore. All right, now, in activity. So on this slide, there is a link to the Google Drive folder of where I've got a bunch of different activities. I'm going to admit to you right now, the Google Drive folder, it's a mess. It's just got everything that I've done with Sphero stuff just in there. Okay? Sometimes there are certain things that are named, it's the same item, but it's named 3 different ways, because maybe it was where I used it in one case and then used it in another. So you are going to see that kind of, but it's all there for you. And if there's something that you're looking for that you don't quite see, you can always email me for my contact info to be able to get that. But one of the first things that we would do with the Spheros, and this was where it was not in a situation with a class. So what we had for one of our first times with the Spheros was where we had available that students could come during study hall. we don't call it study hall at the middle school, but it's the time when all the music kids are at music and everybody else has to be somewhere, all right? So we had that set up that students could volunteer to sign up. They came down to the media center, and we did a Sphero challenge. And after we did the beginning part, like I did with you guys about copy and code and predicting, real simple, it was make the Sphero travel around the square. Shape of a triangle, rectangle, and then circle. The circle is tough. So then your quick flyers, when they get to that one, yeah, they're gonna be spending some time on that. The other ones, maybe they only get to here, maybe they only get to there. But it was fun because it was really just an optional time that we had going on. What was nice with that was that we could use what's called the sensor data. So when I was running the demo and you could see that graph going on, a lot of times it'll pop up down here at the bottom where you can swipe it up, but if the students finish their program, you go up to those 3 dots in the top corner of the app when you run it, you go to sensor data, and then you can get that location graph. And so that's what we would use when they would try to do this. So if I didn't see them make it move around in the square, like I had 3 groups that all wanted checked at the same time, show me your graph. Where's your data? They could show me their sensor data, and then I'd know if it was good or not. It's not gonna be perfect, so if this group, they don't have their full square, this was the beginning I gave them, setting them up for success, so they basically had to add a delay and then have it come across. It was not gonna do it right on the x-axis, it was gonna be up here. That was good enough, we would count it, and then have them move on. So it was nice to have that as a kind of a way to kind of keep things going for them. Then we kind of morphed into where we had a challenge menu. Because what I was having when we kept running these Sphero challenges, sometimes I would have students that they were coming down for the very first time. We had some other times where it was students that had already been down once or twice. So with the challenge menu, and I found these challenges online, along with some of my own, and kind of conglomerated them all together. You know, we kind of put down that they could do these in whatever order they wanted, as long as they did number 1 first. So as long as they got done number 1 first, then they could progress to everything else. Because number 1, doing that square, they're doing roll, they're doing delay, that's gonna give them the basics for pretty much everything else. And they were able to decide what it was they wanted to do. So whether they wanted to try the number 2, weaving through the blocks as like a slalom. To me, that was the most annoying challenge ever. I would not, as a student, want to have to do that one. Some of them really like that. But number 3, with crashing into the walls and having it change color, then we were doing a different type of command. We were doing something called an event command, which basically said, hey, if this situation happens, if the Sphero runs into something, have it now do this little routine, which was pretty challenging, but a lot of the students really liked tackling that one. Then we would have some shape stuff, completing an X, stopping in a target area, doing a triangle, but we said it was equilateral, because if you just tell them triangle, they all do a right triangle. They make half a square and then try to get the diagonal across. Equilateral, a little bit different. And of course, you also had the question, what's an equilateral triangle? Even though there's a picture of it there, yeah, they just said it. The figure 8, we had some students that were really into that, and then I'd also set up, we had like a number 10, kind of like a competition thing. We set up a slalom course, and they had to time, we would time them to see what the fastest time was to get through the slalom course. After the first couple groups, realized that when I set up the slalom course, I need to put little tape marks on the floor for where the gates for our slalom course go, because it took just maybe the second group that went over there, that they decided instead of changing their code, they're just going to change the course. Well, I gave you almost that. Let's just move it a little bit over, and then we got it. All right. Yeah, no, not quite. That wasn't what we were looking for. But then while we were doing these types of things with those challenges, then some different things that you can do while they are working. So while the students are working, a couple things. Remind them about setting the aim. So this little blue light that lights up on the Sphero, that tells you basically, hey, here's the Sphero's tail end. Here's the rear end of it. Which means if I am setting the Sphero to roll at 0 degrees straight ahead, then the back end's got to be here for it to go 0 straight up there. If they don't change that aim, if they don't fix that, they could have that the light is maybe over here, and they hit start, and the Sphero goes like diagonal behind them, and they don't know why. And if the Sphero runs into something, the gyroscope gets a little bit messed up and they'd have to reset that aim. So it's important that they have that aim set. If you see a group kind of struggling, that's something you can always check with them. Or sometimes they think the aim is fine, and they have the light like way over here, and they're like, oh yeah, that's good enough. No, it's not. If you're trying to get it, that exact shape, that's not going to work for you. Keeping the iPad or whatever device they are using, because you can use a Chromebook for some of these as well, having it set at the same way. And what I mean is that when they go to code, they have their iPad right there facing that start. Okay? Because here's what you'll have happen. The students will be coding, they're like, oh, we got to do a rectangle. Okay, 0 degree heading, I'm going up here. Now I need 90, and they turn with it. And then they go like this, and they're like, oh, we got to go this way. Oh, 0 again. And then they go ahead and hit their program, and then their Sphero, instead of making a rectangle, just goes straight on and then just hits the wall. Why does that happen? And then you look at their code, every single roll command has 0. And they're like, yeah, because when we're here, we want to go straight ahead. Yeah, you're right, but that's not what you need to do. Have it right there behind that start to stay kind of set with it. Yes?
Do you know if that works with the computers? Because Sphero just came out with an app for Mac computers. Do you know if it's similar?
I would say it's going to be the same exact. It's going to be the same exact thing. I don't know firsthand. Okay.
I know your answer. So I use Chromebooks in my class, and there's a web app for the Chrome store that you can use. It is exactly the same as the iPad.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
As long as your Chromebook has Bluetooth, which should.
Now.
I do the Sphero with my kids, and then you can just connect through your Chromebook.
And I think the Apple one was just recently, we implemented it last year.
Yeah. And there are certain Sphero there are some Sphero models that will not work. Like you have to kind of check.
The Sparks work with Chromebooks.
Okay.
And I really like the Chromebook component because then when I teach my kids how to type language, they have a keyboard.
Yes.
So when I go from blockly to a language, then I don't have to worry about having everyone have a Bluetooth keyboard or attachment or whatever. It's right there on the Chromebook.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Good question. Yes.
So how often do you ask them to rename it?
Basically I come by and I say if they're seeing something, they're like, oh, it's not doing what they think, then I tell them to rename it. Or if it doesn't collide into anything, a lot of times they don't have to. The other thing that you can tell as well, besides that blue dot, these two blue lights, and as I try to twist the gyroscope, it might be hard to see, but those two blue lights, basically if I hold my pencil or pen there, that straight line, that's kind of giving me an idea too of which way it's going to go. Some students, even when I tell them they don't have to do it every time, will do it every time. And yeah.
Depends how precise you can get too.
Yes.
Which
Exactly. Yep. And then the other thing I always tell them, try to just, when you're adjusting the code, just change one variable. And what I tell them is change the time so that they always use the same speed. Use the same speed, but change time. And here's why. That speed, when I say that I'm setting this to a speed of 90, that does not mean 90 miles per hour. The students all think, oh wow, it's going to go fast. Yeah, you're going to be disappointed. It doesn't go that fast, right? And if I tell them, well, if we change it from 90 to 80, how much slower is that? And a middle schooler is not going to say, well, it's probably in a logarithmic scale, so it's going to be tough to tell. No, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, oh, no. But if you tell them, if we have 1.8 seconds, if you need about maybe half of that, what do we want to set it to? Oh, 0.9. So it's just easier for us to be able to make that change. Those numbers make sense. So that way it's just giving them one thing to change. And then my teacher side of things, then they can just keep the same speed for my speed limit. I don't have to worry about them changing all that, and it just gives them that one thing that they're adjusting. Okay. All right, so that was just some things that we learned as we were going through. One other kind of self-guided thing, we did this during a STEM night, actually 2 different STEM nights, and you could do the same thing if you were setting up stations. Maybe if you only have like 1 or 2 Spheros, and you want to get to the challenge thing, but you don't have time to take them through doing the square. So what we did, I did something called Sphero Mini Golf, and the way that it was set up was basically that each hole would build on the next. So you can see that I had things taped down, everything else. I used these little had these little green Lego spots that actually had students volunteer to build up Lego walls so that if the Sphero rolled into there and stopped, it was in the hole. And of course we had build up Legos so that if it kind of like rammed into there and stayed, it was set, ready to go. So the way that it was set up, hole number 1 was just going to be a straight shot. Hole number 2 was the same exact length as hole 1, but then right where the hole was for number 1, we had the 90-degree turn. So that way what they were doing is they were just starting with code for number 1 and then building onto it for hole 2, building onto it for hole 3. So that way we keep on going. Then we got to hole 4, which basically took number 3, where our cup was there. Now we're coming across again. And then hole 5 was like anything goes. It was basically, I put the start thing and I put some random like toys that were everywhere. So I have 3 sons, they're all older now, so they didn't mind me taking the John Deere tractor and a bunch of other stuff that they had set up to kind of block the path. Okay? So what I would have at each hole, so like hole 1 was a straight shot. I would have this as the start sheet. So since we were doing this during the STEM night, I actually had a volunteer who I made sure that we had iPads already set for them that already had this basic program for them. So it said, okay, roll command 0, 100.4 seconds. It told them how to aim it. They would run it, and it wasn't going to go far enough. I basically had it set that the Sphero for hole 1, if they ran that program, would only go halfway. So then the parents or the students that were with them would be like, oh, we've got to change that time, not 0.4, let's do 0.8. And even if they did like 1, it was going to hit the Lego in the back, stay right there on the hole, and be set ready to go. Okay? So we used that as kind of like doing the tutorial for them while they were working. Then hole 2, we basically would go through the start sheet, would say, hey, now you're just going to go ahead and add on to what you already have. Now we still had to rotate around and help some folks as they were going, but for the most part we had some people that would come through and got right through that. And then that got the, a lot of parents interested, oh, where can I get a Sphero at? My son, my daughter really enjoys this, where can we get those? And it worked very, very well. But it's a nice way where you can kind of walk them through those steps of what you can do with those Sphero robots. Okay? With then getting into some actual classroom integration stuff that we did. So with our geometry class, in middle school we have like this students in 7th grade have geometry like enrichment for half the year because of some gaps in what we do to cover for PSSA. So they have this geometry part going on. So what we did, we ran the Spheros and basically asked them to do some different shapes, but with the caveat of having a specific perimeter or specific area for the shapes that they were doing. So a lot of times they would go ahead and they would make like number 2, they'd get the rectangle, but it would not be the right size if the perimeter was way off. So that way they were going ahead and calculating, they were interpreting the distance time graph the distance position graph that they were getting from the sensor data. So it worked really, really well. And then we had some at the end that were more challenging, like making a pentagon, or number 6, any polygon, any shape that you want to see what you can get. Some kids really took to that. So it worked pretty well. We gave them the stipulations, only having roll delay, having their iPad pointing the same way. For some of those students, some of them had already used the Spheros, but we had some beginners in there. So we kind of had to make sure that we had it set to be able to scaffold support with them either way. So we had set up in our LGI room, students were working. There's our math teacher, Mrs. Reiser, that I was with. And the nice thing was that, so for Sarah, for Mrs. Reiser, she didn't know how to use Spheros, but I was able to give her those 3 tips of what to check for when the students were working. Do they have their aim set? Are they only changing time? Do they have their iPad pointing the same way as their start sheet? And then with having those basics, then as we were going around, she felt real comfortable helping them. It wasn't always that Mr. Senja had to come over. It was Mrs. Reiser was there, and there were even some times where I just kind of disappeared and she was running on her own, which was awesome. And there you can see we're taking a look at their data that they got for filling things out. So then we even took it up a notch with the same teachers with geometry, doing translation and reflection. And so what we had was on a worksheet, we had different spots where they had to go and take their shape. So here, like the rectangle, to translate it, we basically have to shift it onto our graph. So here we're sliding it so that it would start at the 30-30 position down there. So what we did was they had to sketch it first on their worksheet, and that worksheet is in that folder. And then they had to go ahead and have Sphero do the same thing. So what we had set up in that nice LGI room, we had tile. Tile is awesome because if you go ahead and put painter's tape down, and don't put masking tape or your custodian will be very angry at you. If you put that painter's tape down, and then you just happen to measure, and I was able to find out that, oh, each of our tiles is 30 centimeters, which was why on here, why in the world would I mark this as 30, 60, 90, 120? Because that's what our floor tile was. And so we had that marked off. It wasn't exactly 30, but boy, it was close enough so it worked. That we had that set up, had our start spot right there, and then the students were basically trying to get that shape onto that graph from right there. Now, a lot of times, instead of just looking at the graph here, we would have to actually watch it to see where the positions were, where they had things at. And it worked really well. So you can see we actually upgraded to this red, like, gym floor tape that was going on. This student's not doing what I would like them to do, have it pointed so that they have the headings the right way. But as they were working on this, you would have where students would be, here was a day where it was just me and a substitute in there with the class. So you can see that they're working in groups of 2. We were fortunate enough to have them all spread out. You'll see spots where they're like pointing at different parts that they're trying to get to for that XY graph. So it really worked well. And this was on a Friday, second day that they had a substitute in. So they were doing very well. And what was nice was the substitute was a little bit nervous, said, hey, it's okay. Here's the 3 things we're going to look for as you're going around, check that they aim it, everything else. And they really had a good time with that. Now, a different math teacher, we did some stuff with parabolas. And what they had to do with that was basically they had to have it go through a parabola. We set up jump ropes on the floor in the shapes of some different parabolas. They had a start spot. They had an ending square. Thank you. They had an end spot that they had to go. And then what we had was that to show an increase or decrease, they had to have the Sphero shining green when there was an increase in the value and shining red when it was a decrease in the value. Now, uniform motion. This one right here, we're actually going to try this out. So with that same algebra teacher and even in science, looking at the speed of the Sphero. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask all of you to either just to get out a little stopwatch, so whether it be on your device, your phone, whatever, and I'm going to set up this guy right here, the Sphero RVR. And we're going to do a little speed test on him. And this is going to be a simple roll command, and I'm going to crank him up to the highest speed setting that he's got. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and get him connected. And what I'm going to ask to do is that if a few folks in our audience here, what we're going to have is I'm going to have a starting line that's going to be right here in the center. And we are going to travel 3 meters, 300 centimeters, which I marked off as being right here. Okay? Now I've got to get my Sphero connected because it wants to just go ahead and connect to the one that I was already with. So I've got to go ahead and get that. Actually, I'm going to close out of the app and go back in because that'll fix things up for me here. Now, the Sphero RVR, this is definitely a much more expensive robot. We'll talk about different reasons as to why you'd want to use it or even consider it. And this is the only robot that has a power button. Forgot about that. Okay, now we're connected. Oh my, there we go. Okay. All right, view program. Yes, my robot can do more. Okay, so we're going to set right here. So if I have some folks that are right there on the aisle, and if you can't quite see it, you just want to look, you can see. So what we want is, when I hit start, don't go when you see the lights change on the Sphero. You want to start timing when it begins to move. There is a little bit of a delay when it gets the commands from Bluetooth till it actually gets going. So as soon as you see it start to move, when the front of it reaches our finish line, go ahead and stop it, all right? Stop it. What'd you get? 250?
Yeah, 234.
234?
Yeah.
234? Okay. Okay, all right. So we get our times with that, and then what we would go and do is we would want to, and then we would calculate our speed. So what would we do to do that? Distance divided by time. So we would take our 300 centimeters, we would divide it by that 2.4. We would go ahead and calculate out what we get for our speed. Now what we did with the students, we had them do 3 trials. We're not going to do 3 trials, okay? But we would do 3 trials. They would get their times, calculate their average time, calculate their speed, okay? And we would get things, you know, in centimeters per second, all that type of stuff. Well, what we had them do, we would have that distance set. We changed the speed rating. So we actually did, we did 50, 100, and 75 for the speed rating. Here I just cranked it up just for fun, okay? But the students were working. We actually had Hot Wheels track to keep the Sphero in a real nice straight line. That made our data come out much better. If you don't have that, if you don't have the racetrack to do that, it's no big deal. They still work pretty well, still go pretty straight. There's Andy Elder, our algebra teacher that I was working with on that. And so after they would go through and gather their data for those 3 different speeds, then we had them trying some extension stuff. So then we wanted them to use the speed ratings that they got, try to get Sphero to stop exactly on the finish line. So exactly at that 3-meter mark, get it to stop. And they'd be like, oh, we don't know how much time to do. Well, you already have the distance, and you got the rate, so now solve for time. And so, you know, it was nice to be able to do that with those equations, predicting the time it would take. And then we found, for some of these, for the predictions, the students were not going and doing the math for the predictions. They were eyeballing what was their average time for 50, what was it for 75, for 100. When it was 60, they were like, oh, it's probably going to be about this. And most of the times they were right. Which does show that by using the Sphero, we had like consistent velocity going on, which is pretty cool. But we did want them to get a little bit more of the math in there. So then we're going to kind of change it that our numbers aren't quite so whole number there with things. Okay? And then one of the last example ones I want to show you, and this is from right off of the Sphero website, and this is one with American art. I have the link that goes to it through Sphero. And what this one does is talking about actually the artist that was married to Jackson Pollock, all right? And she had a famous painting, I believe it was called 21 Sketches, where it's all of these little pieces combined together as kind of a quilt. So if you take a look up here, and this is from their activity, they actually have you do this, they have it as like a worksheet instead of a slide. But so here I've got an algorithm, a code. If I run this code with the Sphero, and I would have that Sphero dipped in paint, am I going to get A, B, C, or D based on what I got there? And let me see a show of hands. How many think A? How many think B? C? D? Okay, we got a bunch that didn't try. All right, B. You got B. And right away, I mean, one clue you can get, the 115, the 255, you're not getting numbers that are right angles, so that kind of rules out a bunch of those that you're getting into B. All right. One more of them. Now, you know this one's not B, so B's not a choice there for you. And unfortunately, you're seeing a bunch of corners on that one. And and I won't ask for a show of hands here, but I'll give you the answer, is C. Okay? So the way they tie this in, this is on their site. This is the overall painting that was done. Okay? That's made up with this. And what they go through, and they have the instructions there for the students, but is basically that they are given one of those pieces that they have to recreate with their program. Then when they are set and ready to go, they're given a piece of paper that you put those cardboard, basically put it inside a box. So if you've got that empty, if you use copy paper at all in your school, get one of those empty boxes, put it inside of there. You dip that Sphero into the paint, and then right within there, they go ahead and run their program after the teacher's seen it to recreate the piece that they were given there. Okay? Now, Sphero does sell this like little rubber coating thing that you can buy to put over top of the Sphero for the paint. If you're using acrylic paint, it comes right off that shell anyway, so you don't really need to get that. My wife's an art teacher, so I know that. And then last, the other thing that I mentioned briefly was where you use the Sphero not for the coating, but for them to engineer stuff with. So with the jousting, if all you do is give them a cup, whether it be a plastic, I like that they didn't use a red Solo cup, but they went ahead with plastic cups there, these pencils, you can use Connects, all that kind of stuff, and design a way to have the jousting. And if I go to the Sphero website, and I'll show you that where you can get resources for stuff, this person submitted in here this whole part of a jousting tournament where they've got a history of the jousting, making a banner for the house, all that kind of stuff, getting things designed, and then actually running the competition. Now, in this case, if you're doing this where you're going to do the jousting, you would have the students driving them. Okay, they've got to be able to control it. They can't just program moving in a block. That's boring. So yeah, they are going to just remote control it, move it around. But that's not the goal of this. The engineering they're doing is by the design that they're doing right there with that. You can also have where it's like, hey, we want you to somehow have that Sphero to be able to draw on its own. So can they devise a way to fix a marker or something, attach it there to be able to draw certain things that they can do. And then this one I really like, and we've done this, the Connects Chariot Challenge. So using Connects, and really you could use any kind of material, what you can do to go ahead and get that Connects set up and ready to go to compete. I'll show you a little video here from an elementary school that's done this. We've done it ourselves as well, but I didn't take video during the time, I was a little busy. But the Sphero just sits in there, and they're actually just controlling it. They're just remote controlling it. So that Sphero is acting as the power source to go ahead and propel it down. Okay? And so they could then go and change their design. How do we make sure that the Sphero is staying set enough in there so that it's going straight down the track, that it's able to keep control? They're able to do that there throughout that process. Okay? Now, in terms of which Sphero you might want to get, these are the three main common ones that you'll see: the Mini, the Spark, the Bolt. The one that I was demoing with is the Spark. That's the one that's pretty tough, does a lot with it. The Mini is a nice, cheaper option. Just be careful of the Mini. It's not a solid case. It's like two plastic shells that come together. So if they drop it, the shells will come apart. And in fact, you have to take it apart to plug it in to charge it. Where the other ones, it's an induction charger, so this will have a cord plugged into there, just USB-C, I believe it is, and you just sit it on there, starts blinking, you know that it's charging up, ready to go. The Bolt has a little LED display on there. Has anybody in here used the Bolts? Okay. Have you done much with the LED display?
We just got them.
Okay.
So I'm coming up with ideas to figure.
Okay.
I'll let you know if we do.
Anybody else doing any of the LED display?
I had our kids do a maze, and on some of the corners they would have to change the color of the LED, or you can like make it strobe. You can, I actually coded one to play Simon Says.
Oh, okay.
And so you can go in and you can change the matrix. So like if you want it to like stomp your feet, it says stomp your feet, but then it shows it's like a sneaker and it looks like it's moving.
Oh, that's cool.
So it was cool.
All right. Yeah.
So we try to implement them and integrate them into all of our classes. So when we get into social studies, we get timelines. And when it got to out of 10,
Okay, cool. That's neat. All right. Yeah, so, I would say definitely for stuff that you want to do with activities in the classroom, I would kind of tend to go this way. If you're looking at like a small group using them, if you're not worried too much about the toughness of it, the mini, if you're thinking of using it for the engineering part of like some of the connects things or with the cups, that's not going to work. You would need one of those on there. The RVR. So I showed this where I was just doing a speed type thing, which does a lot to it. This also has a color sensor. So what I can do is I can set up these little squares on the floor, and I can put in the program that, hey, when you run over something that's red, do a turn. Oh, you run over something that's yellow, turn back that way, or go in reverse. But the other part to it, besides having all that, is they call this their hackable robot, because inside of here is a port that you could go ahead and attach a Raspberry Pi, an Arduino, and then really go to town with some other type of stuff. So I had gotten a kit to do that from SparkFun. It came with these instructions and then a whole bunch of components. So I was like, oh. And my son is studying computer engineering at Penn State. He's a freshman, and he's big into Raspberry Pi and everything else. And I showed him that, and he goes, wow, that looks complicated. I'm like, great. But then what he said was, oh, well, that's awesome. With that, you could hook it up. I'm like, so maybe I could have a high school kid would figure that out and be able to do that. He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, good, because I can't. And that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason we're looking for is like once you get past the coding part, if you want them to actually do something with the robotics itself, with engineering the robot, then this is the way to go. Okay, they are more $250. The other thing that with Sphero, since they merged or took over Little Bits. If you're familiar with Little Bits, they are coming out with kits for Little Bits that will then go attach right onto here, which are supposed to have some things like with a projectile launcher and things like that, which look really cool. I was told by the rep that is going to be coming this summer, so if it's based on the timeline of other things, next winter it'll be out, ready to purchase, and going from there. So yeah, that's the RVR. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. I'm just going to switch real quick a moment because I know we're running out of time. I was going to run the program, but I won't have time to do that there. But I just want to show you in terms of the color sensor thing. So here's the program with the RVR that, oh, when it scans yellow, it's going to go ahead and turn in that direction. When it scans red, whoops, when it scans red, it's going to go ahead and turn back the other way. So you can set these parts on there, and you don't even have to use these cards. You're able to position the Sphero. You put that sensor over top of something. I put it over this Lego piece. I tap a button, and it'll set it to that color. So like right there, I can go ahead and say, you know what, now I want the color instead now. Oh, I'm not connected, so never mind. Okay. But I would be able to set it to whatever color. So even though it comes with a couple of little cards, you don't have to use those. You can just use plain old instruction paper, and that will do the same thing. Okay. Well, we are about out of time. I will mention Sphero EDU to get on there, to get an account. They are being a little stricter now, so when you go to sign up, it's not just a quick login with Google and like, hey, I'm an educator, boom, you're in. Now they make you verify that you're an educator. So it asked me to send an image of a web page that showed that I'm a staff member. So they kind of changed some things with it.
I think I just sent a link when I
you're able to send a link. Yeah, I had that. You sent a picture of your badge. Yeah, so there's some different stuff. The one thing that I'm starting to see now a little bit more of, so like if I go in here and I say I'm going to search 6 through 8 art for activities, any of these with a star on it means you don't have access to that. You have to subscribe to the computer essentials course. So here I go into this one that had the star. This actually is part of Computer Science Foundations. That's something they're charging for. Okay? Now, you can still find other stuff. You know, so the one that I was showing you was World of American Art 3 of 8. That was on there. So a lot of good ideas that are on there that are still accessible. Okay? So we are out of time. I want to thank you for attending. If you have any questions, if you want to come up and talk with me, be glad to. My contact info is there. And thank you all very much for coming out this morning. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, bud. I gotta come up with some ideas from summer camp and so.
Oh, yeah.
That last little bit with the Sphero bouncing, I was like, oh, I guess we're doing that.
There you go, yeah.
Perfect. And since you don't, like that's the one thing, I like doing the stuff with connects, but then if you don't have enough connects, it's
Yeah, my school, I teach at I'm entirely online school too. We're all at we're all 1-to-1.
Okay.
Actually 2-to-1. It's at my dad's impact.
Wow.
You know, when you don't have to spend money on all the overhead and traditional school, you get they just spend those everything that they want to short.
How's your wife doing? Jackie, right?
good, yeah.
We're here to see us live.
Oh, okay, yeah, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. Doing very good.
How are you? Hi.
I will.
Do you have my son Michael Ward's at all, please?
So what grade is he in now? So I go in and out of the different classes, like so.